In this episode of KIDZ Podcast, I am honored to share wisdom with you about leading kids in your church and in your home. Dealing with kids is hard work, and I'm praying that we add some tools to your tool belt today. So let's dive into today's topic. So, your boss is a jerk. Let's talk about it on this episode of KIDZ Podcast. That's right, you got a boss who seems kind of sus, unethical, mean, a jerk, totally trash talking you, totally dissing you, totally disrespecting you, totally not acting the way you think he should be acting or she should be acting. On this episode, we're going to talk all about that, and I'm going to give you 4 things to consider as you navigate through this sticky situation. And this particular podcast is going to be a little bit more sensitive. I'm going to do my best to be sensitive because, hey, I understand. I've been there. I've done that. I've had trashy bosses before, but I've also had an excellent boss. And before we go too far, I just want to say that my current boss is awesome sauce. Yes, sir. I love my boss. I've been working with him for a good 12, going on 13 years now, and I've stuck around in this church for him and him alone. That's right. Because of him and my calling to serve under him, I have stuck around through thick and thin. So my prayer is that anyone listening to this, that one day you could have the blessing of working under a boss much like mine, one that's full of vision and full of leadership. And so let's press on as we talk about trashy bosses. All right. I got it broken down into 4 categories, and what I really hope you guys come to, prepare your hearts with is that this is a sticky topic. There's no one answer fixes all. All the variables that you're dealing with in your situation are nothing alike the variables that I've dealt with in my situation, and won't be the same as someone else's situations. There might be some elements that are the same. Yeah. But the reality is, because of the relationships, because of the details, it won't be exactly the same. But I hope there's some wisdom to glean here and some knowledge to apply and some tools that we can put into your tool belt to help you be a better leader through this process. Above all, I want you to know, from pastor to pastor or leader to leader, I am praying for you. Today's podcast is going to be largely for those who are pastors, whether you be a kids pastor or a youth pastor, working in the church environment. This won't be so much about your spouse. That's a different episode. We're not going to talk about that. And you could probably contextualize this if you were in the non-church world. But bottom line, a lot of today's context will come from that of the church world. So let's dig in. Number 1 here. Number 1 is the most important element in my opinion, and it is this. It's understanding the difference between work versus ministry. Work versus ministry. But Pastor Ron, the ministry is not a business. That's a very good point. And again, I approach this with sensitivity because there's some hurting people going through a rough relationship with their boss right now. And the words I'm giving, I hope, comfort you as well as reshape some perspective. And when it comes to ministry and business, I come from the philosophy that church is a business. And if I were to be exact, church is a business and ministry. But let me explain, because there's some of you right now whose feathers just got ruffled, right? Because you've always learned and always been taught that church is ministry, that church is not a business, and church is a certain way. And so let me share why I think that church is both and. both and a business and a ministry. Here's why. The church has what we call books, or specifically accounting books. There is a budget to work with. There are expenses to deal with. There are people to get paid. There are vendors that need to be compensated. There are lots of little details that require the handling of financing. And if you do it wrong, well, the government has the legal right to come in and bust you up. So, there's one reason. Another reason is that the church is full of employees and an employer. Yep. The employees and employer. You can probably put this under the category of human resourcing. And just like any other job where there's an employee or employer, there are compliances and there are laws that protect both the employee and the employer. And if you do not follow these compliances, the government has the legal right to come in and bust you up. A very, very good example is sexual assault in the workplace, overworking somebody, terminating contracts. The list goes on. Anything that has anything to do with human resourcing in the business world is also applied in the church world. Just because it's church doesn't mean it's going to be different. Should it be different? That's a different topic, a different question, a different mission. But once again, I'm saying that the church is both and a business and a ministry. We can go on and talk about many other categories. A big one to consider is background clearances and screening. Yep. If you do this wrong, in fact, there are stories now in our United States of America of churches who are closing their doors forever because background checks and clearances did not work out well, because they were not under compliance because of something taboo. The government got involved, people got sued, and ouch, the church had to close their door forever. So I cannot over-iterate all these little compliance things that any business is obligated to honor, as well as the church. Yes, we are a church. Yes, we are a ministry. Yes, we do things from the kingdom mindset. And we also do things in compliance with our local laws. So, I'm not saying church is not a ministry. I'm saying it is both and. And once you, as an associate level leader or an employee, come to terms with the reality that your senior pastor is ultimately your boss, the CEO or CFO or whatever OOO, it will help you to step back and learn to say, yes, sir, and march forward. Now, I remember back when I was a young lad doing ministry for the first time, and I wanted ministry done a certain way, and my way, and only my way, because God called me to do big things in big ways, and I was his man of the hour. And that I was not the boss. That didn't roll well with the boss. There is a vision, there is a plan, there's an organizational leadership structure, there are directives, there are stakeholders, and as an employee, you are bottom of the list. It was no fun to learn that from my perspective. I did not like being on the bottom of the totem pole. But that's the reality of church work. While I'm doing ministry, it is still a job that I report to somebody. And there will be constantly and again times where I disagree with my boss. Even now, after 13 years, my boss and I have not always seen eye to eye. However, through the process, I respectfully challenge the thoughts, I respectfully respect the thoughts, and I respectfully submit to the thoughts. I don't just do what I want because that's what I want when I want it. That is not healthy leadership, nor is it healthy ministry. So, Number one is the biggest one, and I kind of really encourage this. I know a lot of pastors, associate level pastors, don't like to hear it, and I get it. However, I've also been an executive pastor that has worked in that legal realm of the church before. And I've heard lots and lots of stories of pastors losing their jobs because they just did not respect the fact that their boss was their senior pastor. So, my biggest encouragement out of all four of these little nuggets is wrap this truth around your mind that you are an employee and your lead pastor is your employer. Let's move on. Number two is you as a leader will only be effective in leadership if you are also submissive in leadership. That's right. You will be effective in leadership if you are also submissive in leadership. And so, as I said earlier, I don't know all the nuances and details and variables that your situation might be going through. My first question that I should have considered back when I was a young youth pastor was, am I being submissive to this situation? Am I being teachable to what the boss wants? Am I doing my part to help my boss? At the end of the day, I recognize that I am not the lead pastor. I am not called to be the lead pastor. I do not even want to become a lead pastor. There is a blessing and a curse to not being the lead pastor. My lead pastor has to deal with a lot of people. He's got to report to an entire board. Hundreds of people don't like him during 2020. And other employees and other staff have things they have to say about him. And he's got to please a whole bunch of people. And the last thing I want to do for my boss is be the cause of one more headache, one more issue. So if he's got to make a choice between going left and right, I don't want to be the butthead. Let's just be real. I don't want to be the butthead for him. I want to be his champion. I want to be his armor bearer. I want to be his biggest help. I don't always know what it is, and I don't always understand, but I want to respect the fact that he's in a role that I don't want, and that everything I do affects his job too. So if he says go left, bro, I'm going to go left, and I'm going to go good. I'm going to do the best left-hand turn I can possibly do for my boss. And I'm not going to give him a headache about it. And so through this process, I challenge you. Whatever the variables are, have you asked, am I being submissive right now? Or am I being a butthead? Oh! But for real, are you being submissive to whatever it is that's going on? All the other questions, they're reasonable questions. But those questions don't matter if you are being a human who is being selfish and not considering the full picture. Let's move on. Number 3. The leader versus the worker. Leader versus worker. Let me explain what my thought is here. My thought is this. Not all senior pastors make good leaders. Ouch. I'm going to say it again. Especially if you're a senior pastor and you're listening to this. Not all senior pastors make good leaders. Ooh, the same is true in other fields. Not all doctors make good leaders. Not all counselors make good leaders. Not all teachers make good leaders. Not all, you name it. Not everyone is built to be a good leader. And there are some leadership books that talk about the 5 levels of leadership or 6 levels of leadership or whatever levels of leadership, and that there are different levels from beginner up to the advanced. This is how and why we have coordinators versus directors versus the chief, right? And not all senior pastors make good leaders. They too have to learn. They too are going through a growing process. And so perhaps your boss is a very good shepherd, loves on the people, makes the hospital visits, preaches from the stage. Just he's an excellent shepherd. But when it comes to human resourcing, organizational leadership, and being a directing leader, maybe his XP needs to grow a little. And if you are able to identify that that is actually the case, that's going to give me a little bit of ease on my expectations. The way I like to think of this is not getting upset about what I was not expecting. For example, I love to fish. Everyone knows I love to fish. So and I like catching steelhead and like salmon, and I am not going to go to the local pond and go fishing and then get jammed up, upset because I didn't catch a big steelhead. No. I'm not going to get upset because I already know that there are no steelhead in that water. And so this concept can be contextualized in leadership. If I already know some details about what's going on, there's no reason for me to get upset about what has not gone on. And so perhaps your leader is a great worker, but not really a great leader. He might just be a leader by a title, not out of ability. So be understanding of that truth. So let's go on to number four. Number one, we said it was the worker versus, or the work versus the ministry, or the business versus the ministry. Number two, we said it was ethics versus submission. Number three, we said it was the leader versus the worker. And number four, we're saying it's ethics versus desire. Ethics versus desire. So maybe you're in a situation where your boss is doing something that in your heart is unethical. That you cannot work with that theology, you cannot work with that philosophy, you cannot work with those legalities, all that, right? But whatever it is they're doing or saying, it's puts you up against a wall so much that you're like, no, I do not want to be here. Or no, that is not acceptable. Or no, that is not legal. Or no, whatever your variable is. You now need to question, do you want to deal with the ethics, or do you want to deal with your desire? Your desire to stay, your desire to plant roots in this community, your desire to continue to work with these specific teenagers? What is it? I had a senior pastor once who I loved, and then he had to leave within a year of me being there. The gentleman that came after him, he was not a very good leader. I did not enjoy him. And I didn't like his style. It was not quote unquote unethical, but I still didn't like it. So I chose to continue my role as the youth pastor because I was in love with the teenagers. And I did it for about a year. I just continued to work so that I could be with the teenagers. More and more and more, my senior pastor, who was a poor leader, kept doing things that was not right, not ethical. It wasn't the proper way to deal with it as a human resourcing leader. It wasn't the proper way to deal with it as an organized leader. And it kept putting me between a rock and a hard spot, and it kept hurting me emotionally as well as professionally. It kept going. So I had to make a hard choice. Do I want to deal with these ethics, or do I want to deal with my desire to stay for the kids? And that might be where you are. There is a very real possibility that what you're dealing with is a leader who is a punk, jerk, no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing jerk. You're going to have to make a choice. Deal with it or move on. So, we've talked about 4 things here: dealing with the business versus the ministry, dealing with effectiveness versus submission, dealing with leadership versus workership, dealing with ethics versus your desire. Put these things in perspective. It might help you. But if you can't deal with it, it might be time. There's a whole other podcast that I've did a few weeks back. It's on the idea of transitioning. Maybe you might want to look up that. But if not, pray, right? Um, Prayer is super important. I believe in prayer, and I believe that prayer prepares you for the proper answer. And so, whatever happens, my friend, uh, pray hard, and trust in the Holy Spirit. If you have questions, I'm happy to help. I know this is a super sensitive topic. I want to be sensitive to your heart. So please find someone that you can vent to, talk to, glean wisdom from. If I can be that person, I'd be happy to. Hit me up. I got an email. Until next time, everybody say bye, Pastor Juan.
Thank you for letting us speak into your life. At the end of the day, our goal is simple. We just want to raise these little people to one day become big people. Be sure to check out our website at rongaleministries.com to show your support. Thank you for listening, and be sure to smash that like button and turn that button blue or whatever else the kids are doing these days. Until next time, everybody say, bye, Pastor Juan.